this $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. Where do you put this on the BFD scale, on Joe Biden's BFD scale?
It's pretty up there. I mean, it's about a year's worth of policy in one piece of legislation. It has not only obviously the relief elements in terms of the direct payments and unemployment benefits and things of that nature, but there's a significant amount of public investment in this bill. And it's interesting. Larry Summers, among his list of complaints, which were less about the bill and more about not being selected for a top administration job. But one of the big ones that he said was there isn't. I'm good with investment. I would be fine with public investment in a piece of legislation right now, but this isn't that. And that's simply not true. There's significant opportunity for investment from state and local government in infrastructure systems, for investment in schools to improve ventilation and do all sorts of various learning environment improvements. There's $7 billion for community health centers. There was only $11 billion over 5 years in the entire Affordable Care Act. There's $30 billion for transit. I mean, there is a significant amount of investment in this bill that is going to be ongoing and is going to have multiplier effects for many years down the road.
All right, so let's I think there were people who were hoping for this bill, and let's just start here because we should just address it. People were hoping for some structural changes, right? Like the $15 minimum wage, and then I think there was some I wouldn't call them structural changes in terms, but maybe philosophical ideas of like no means testing on the checks. And them being $2,000, from I think more of a political concern than anything else. I mean, in terms of money that is actually being delivered to people, the fact that people are getting a $1,400 check as opposed to a $2,000 check is, in many respects, it seems to me, offset by the enormous amount of money that people are going to be getting if they have kids, the subsidies that go up in terms of the ACA. 100% subsidies of Cobra. I mean, put that into context. The lack of structural changes, but what the implications of the investments will do within those structures that haven't changed.
Well, I think what you're seeing is a recognition that 90s style welfare reform failed, and the need for supporting families in particular, but also the working class and even the middle class, is an important function of government. And unfortunately, we were locked into this process whereby you could only, in this bill, extend those types of needs to add to the welfare safety net for a year. But I know that the administration is extremely interested in extending those permanently, particularly the child allowance, and whether they make it a tax credit or bring it out and just make it a full allowance and put it in the Social Security Administration. But I think what you're seeing is a difference in the philosophy of government. And so now in the future, I think that's something that needs to be carried through, because obviously, as you said, the changes to the child tax situation is only for a year. The changes to the subsidies in the ACA, preventing what has been known as the subsidy cliff, where if you made a certain amount of money per year, you would be responsible under the exchanges to pay as much as 20% of your income in insurance premiums. Now that is down to the point where everybody is paying no more than 8%, 8.5%. So that's only available for 2 years. The unemployment changes, which I think ought to be made permanent, increasing the eligibility of who is eligible for unemployment, including freelancers and gig workers, that is only available until September. So you've created this sort of pop-up safety net where you've made some philosophical beliefs that people, low-income people, people with families need support, but you've only done it for a certain period of time. And so I think that now that philosophical argument has been won on the side of, yes, we need the public sector to get involved. The task now is to carry that forward.
That's a great point, and I guess the child allowance is, I think, a structural change. I mean, the idea that the U.S. government is going to be paying provide people support for raising a child, and $300 per child a month for 6 to 18-year-olds, and $3,600. I mean, I think it's $360 maybe for under 6. So. Give me a sense of all right. So let's put this into context. It implies, at the very least, or is maybe explicit, that there is a fundamental shift. I mean, people are talking about this as the end of the Reagan era of thinking. How durable is that end? I mean, you don't know. That's it.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me? David?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I can hear you.
How durable do you think how durable do you think that is? I mean, how durable is that are they going to be at the end like, well, we're past COVID, the economy is booming. I'm just hypothetical. The economy's booming. We don't need to do these things anymore. Or do we learn the lesson that, hey, the economy's booming because we did this. This is making people suffer left. Like, that's a good thing. We should not change that.
It's entirely based on what happens within the next year. Whether or not we carry this forward and make these things permanent features of our safety net or not. There's people like to quote this thing that Biden said, I think, at a fundraiser, where he said, nothing will fundamentally change. So in this bill, something did, in fact, fundamentally change, and it was this change in philosophy, this change in what the public needs are. But it's only a temporary shift, and it won't be a fundamental shift until we make that decision. Now, I think the administration believes that they have a really good argument to make once they have now given the families this advanceable support. So instead of waiting for their taxes, they get it every month. The child tax credit existed, right? It was a $2,000 per child tax credit, but now it's first of all available up to age 18. Second of all, under 6, you get more money for those individuals. And third of all, it's advanceable, so you get a monthly check rather than having to wait once a year in your taxes. So once people are getting that check, it's going to be the theory is it's going to be very hard for the political system to say, you're not getting that check anymore. It's an effective tax increase. I mean, because this is the child tax credit, Republicans would have to be increasing taxes on working families, on all families in America. That's the theory is that's going to be very difficult to take away from people. And the same thing for the new Affordable Care Act subsidies, which the administration absolutely wants to make permanent. In theory, that makes sense. In practice, it's very easy to not pass a bill, right? I mean, it's very easy to just continue gridlock on the course that it's on. it is not sort of preordained, let's say, that just because not doing something will cause a bad action doesn't mean that bad action won't take place. So I think it's going to be a difficult fight. Now, are they going to use reconciliation to make permanent the child tax credit or these subsidies? You can do that as long as you pay for it. So they chose not to pay really for much of anything in this bill. There are a few minor tax increases in this bill on wealthy families, mostly because they put a cap. They said this is a $1.9 trillion budget reconciliation, and they actually went over that cap, so they had to do a little bit of tax increases, revenue increases to offset that. But if you offset the whole cost, then yes, you can make this permanent in reconciliation. But you have to choose what those offsets would be. While it's simple in theory, getting every member of the Democratic Senate caucus on board for a specific set of tax increases that would fund this specific thing, because there's this idea out there that these offsets are finite, right? And I don't want to use them on that. I want to use them on climate, or I want to use them on education, or I want to use them on healthcare. I don't want to use it on this child. So I think that's going to be where some of the difficulty lies here, is finding a mix of these particular offsets. I mean, everybody, it seems, in the Democratic caucus wants to continue this child tax credit program. There are differences of opinion as to how you administer it. But the question is going to be, are you going to be able to find the offsets and actually get it done?
You know, what strikes me is that we have on one hand this sort of idea with the child tax credits, with the ACA subsidies, that once the American public, and I do think like getting the check on a monthly basis is going to change the way I think that Americans view their government, because this is, it's not for a disability. It's not because you've been paying into the system and you're retiring. It's because I have a child. And like the rewiring that goes on, I think, in the mind of an American citizen who's like, wait a second, my government's supporting me for something that is like my choice to have a child, and to, is recognizing that like, hey, this represents some financial challenges. I think that's it's going to be fascinating to see what happens there. But what's also interesting to me is that if policymakers perceive and must have that same sort of notion in their head, that's why they think this is going to be a durable policy and they're going to be able to come back and deal with it in a year. It's the opposite for the Cobra subsidies. Right? Like they are subsidizing Cobra. If you lose your job, and correct me if I'm wrong here, if you lose your job, you're fired or you're laid off, you would be responsible for both ends of your health insurance. You would be responsible for what your employer paid and what you paid, and that's Cobra. Now the U.S. government is going to step in and pay both sides of that for you. So you're going to get 100% free health insurance. And it is the most inefficient way to provide that, it seems to me, from the government's perspective. It's, it's still great if you're getting your health insurance, but from the government's perspective, it's the most costly way to do it. You could slide people to say like, here's your Medicare card. You're on Medicare now. But they didn't want, it's almost like the opposite. They didn't want to rewire the American citizen's brain in that way, just in the child tax credit way. Yeah. I mean, what do you make of that, David?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be renewed for precisely the reason you're talking about. I think that there is a significant portion of progressives in Congress who have no interest in continuing that on anything but an emergency basis. I mean, the theory behind it right now is that you have millions of people out of work, and still a year into this crisis, 700,000 people every week go on to first-time unemployment claims. And so you have this tremendous amount of churn. And so on a temporary basis, it makes sense. Let's not compound the problem here when we have so many people going on to unemployment of, also hitting them with this huge health insurance premium that they have to figure out in their life. Let's just cover that cost. That makes sense right now. In the future, I don't think it does, because it's extremely inefficient, as you say, and it conflicts with a lot of priorities that progressives have for how you begin that process of rewiring the American brain, and saying that yes, the government has a role to play not only in providing and making sure families aren't falling into poverty because they have children, but also the government has a responsibility on health insurance. I think what is done on the subsidy end that really does guarantee affordable options of health coverage for everyone, no matter your socioeconomic status, I think that is a move in a certain direction. We had a piece by John Walker this week that talks about that as really a sea change. In even the Obamacare itself did not guarantee affordable health care. It guaranteed it for a subset of people, but if you made the wrong amount of money, the quote unquote wrong amount of money, it was not going to be affordable for you. And so, and indeed, there were some people who, for whom it was unaffordable, where they were waived. If you remember this in the Affordable Care Act, they were waived from the individual mandate penalty, right? They said, oh, it's not affordable to you, so you don't have to pay a penalty for not getting health insurance. Well, that's essentially ceding the point that some insurance is going to be unaffordable for some people. And that has been corrected in this bill for 2 years, saying that everybody is going to be offered coverage that is affordable in some way. Now, is it the best coverage that it can be? No, and that's why I think we have to improve, where we can improve with a public option, or with moving more people onto Medicare or Medicaid, or federalizing Medicaid so that everybody gets the same opportunities no matter what state you live in, and you're not subject to the whims of Republican governors who don't want to expand it.
Right.
This bill also tries to bribe states to expand Medicaid. It gives more money than needed. It's
Right.
not going to work. It's completely not going to work. But a state that hasn't expanded Medicaid would actually be given money to expand it. Like, they would get more than 100%.
They would make money. It is like
they would make money on the deal.
But they've signaled
they would make money on the deal.
20 years at this.
No one's going to do it.
The Republican governors
That's
are never going to do it.
That's amazing.
Which is why I think it is unbelievably important. We have a piece today also, I'm just plugging my pieces, by Alex Salmon, saying that this proves, like, you got to federalize Medicaid. There's no reason that the fact of where you live should penalize you in terms of your ability as a poor person to get health coverage. That could be done through a reconciliation process.
I don't want to prevent people from going and reading Alex's piece, but just give explain to people just briefly. Medicare is federal program, but Medicaid is it's not block granted, but it is money that is given to states by the federal government, and then they basically are in charge of how they will implement these programs, who they will cover, et cetera, within certain federal parameters, as opposed to the federal government just you going down to, like, it's part of Social Security Administration or something like that. That's basically
right.
it.
It's a federal state partnership, and there are some guardrails around how the states have to administer it, but they have pretty substantial variance within those guardrails. And so if you live in Texas or Florida and you make something just above the poverty line, up to 138%, you do not get eligibility for Medicaid. Whereas if you live in California or New York, you do. And that is just sort of an accident of the state in which you live and the public policy decisions that state has made. And so why not make this even across the entire population? This is true of unemployment as well. The unemployment system is administered by the various states. There's substantial variation into how well managed those unemployment systems are. Why not federalize that? There is this bill gives $130 billion for education funding, and actually increases the per capita share based on whether or not that school district is a poor school district. And that is a form of federalization in a sense, in terms of the government playing a role in topping up those state budgets, which usually the state and localities are take control in terms of who is in charge of funding education. So there are a lot of ways where the logic sort of this system and the way in which this has gone through, it might make a lot of sense to federalize these state administered programs.
And to be clear, that would involve basically getting rid of the filibuster and convincing 50 Democratic senators that we should do that, right? I mean, this would have to be done by statute. This isn't one of those. The executive branch can simply do this. No. Let's we'll have plenty of time to talk about what are the chances of filibuster reform and the talking filibuster. I think we'll get a sense of that probably in the run up to HR 1. Do you have a sense of before, because I want to move on to the CRA. You just wrote about that, but do you have a sense of what the timing is for HR 1? It's been passed by the House. HR 1 now goes to the Senate. It's S1. This is a massive sort of election protection bill, if you will, or, to protect the franchise of people, and also sort of an anti-corruption, I guess, bill, you could say, good government bill. What is have you heard anything in terms of timing in the course of your reporting?
Congress and the White House really went all in on the American Rescue Plan. And this was what they were really pushing towards for the last 2 months from a legislative standpoint. The only other thing that has really been on the agenda in the Senate has been nominations for various executive branch positions. The House has teed up all this legislation that they had passed 2 years ago and moved it over to the Senate so that the Senate has the opportunity to pass it. The two things that I've heard about from Senate aides that it seems legislatively the Senate is going to move forward on is something to do with China and particularly technology research or semiconductor research to bring back certain manufacturing back from China. Number one, and number two, there's going to be hearings and probably at least a procedural vote on background checks on gun safety legislation. So neither of those things are HR 1. And I think the White House is very concerned right now with touting the American Rescue Plan and just they're doing an event, I believe, today and throughout the next couple of weeks. That is their primary focus, I think, over the next month. So I don't really have a sense of where HR 1 falls in that. I think Schumer is very interested in this China bill, and I think he's interested in showing something on guns. So maybe HR 1 comes down the road. I also believe that there's going to be a process on the minimum wage. Probably something on the order of setting a deadline for bipartisan groups to work out some sort of solution on the minimum wage, maybe by the end of May, maybe by June. I've heard this floated. It's not really definitive yet, but the idea would be that there would be some sort of process that says to centrist Democrats and Republicans who are interested in getting something done, you have 2 months to figure this out. Now figure it out, and then we'll put something on the floor. HR1 has not gotten a lot of discussion in the talks that I've had with people in the Senate. I do believe it will happen, but I think that it's almost a cart before the horse situation where they're trying to figure out the filibuster before they figure out HR1, or at least what their next move would be. Because obviously, when you put HR1 on the floor, it's going to be blocked. So they almost want to figure out, okay, what do we do? What's step 2 before they get to step 1 and start scheduling it?